Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our currently heating up Mars and Ketu transit. This began June 6th. Ketu and Rahu, the nodes of the moon, had moved into their respective axis of Aquarius and Leo on the 29th of May, and I did a bigger video on that, which you can check out. But Mars moved in on June 6th, really starting to create some fire in this area. K2 is where we're choosing not to look. This is an area that we tend to have like a landmine beneath the surface, something that we don't want to look at, somewhere we've had a lot of experience before, we have a lot of wisdom, and we have this precision with K2. And this is going to be really important as we see this alignment heat up, because Mars is less about the precision and more about the fire, more about the anger, more about the action, more about marching in and blowing things up. And if there's already a landmine beneath the surface, then that's where things get really explosive. Mars and K2 together bring this very militant energy because they're both fiery. They both have that quality of fire. Um, but yet K2's is again kind of beneath the surface and very specific. It's this energy, if you can picture K2 as the lower half of the body or the lower part of the body, not the head, basically, all but the head, down to a tail. And it's pointing at what's wrong. This is the thing that's wrong. Well, what is the sign that K2's in? Leo, the sign of the government, sign of presidents and kings and rulers and those who are in charge. Rahu across the way is where the energy is focused usually in these transits, in these axis that we have of the eclipse points. Rahu's where we put our energy. We're like, that's the thing I want to do, in the collective, in the future, in community, in the little people. This is where Rahu's focus is. But Mars brings a different energy in. Instead of looking away where Ketu is and focusing just where Rahu is, Mars comes in and says, oh, you can't not look here because I'm going to start blowing things up. Wherever Mars is, we're active, we're courageous, we're disciplined. Mars is the general of the army marching into the territory of the king. And what we saw right off the bat, as soon as this transit began, at least in Los Angeles, was literally the National Guard and military being called in to a local place, marching in to stop these Rahuvian protests of Aquarius nature. And the other side of that is, well, what would we not be paying attention to if Mars wasn't there? Well, we might not be paying attention to the different power that's being held and how it's being used. We might have this disgust and this disdain for that because that's often what K2 brings us. Because of our past experiences with whatever area that is, we tend to feel this like ugh feeling about it, but we don't look at it. We like walk in with our hands over our eyes, kicking and screaming that we don't want to look at it. But because Mars marched in, it's like we can't not look at it. We don't have that choice anymore. And the two are very far away still from each other. So as they come closer together, we're going to see this really start to heat up. And what my personal experience is in these kind of transits is that the initial part of the transit, like the June 6th, we see the headlines. We see the big thing that explodes that makes everybody pay attention. And the nature of news is to keep repeating it and showing it to us in every different way. I happened to be in Los Angeles at the time and I was at my family home that had newspapers, so I'm seeing every day the headlines are just like repurposed versions of the same thing because they want to continue to have something to talk about. So the headlines blow up and this starts to activate all the people who are not around the actual activity that's happening or the thing that's happening, which is really, I mean, it's a very small area in downtown Los Angeles. everywhere else, people were going about their business. And so this explosion in the news then creates this energy everywhere else, and it starts to build in that way. But the truth of these transits is that as they get closer and closer together is when we see the real destruction. That's when we see, lives being lost. That's when we see homes being destroyed. That's when we see the bulk of the suffering that actual people experience as a result of these kind of things. So it's not just the first off headline that, excites everybody and gets everyone sort of interested for however long they're interested before they move on to their own, next important thing in their life. These huge moments are the ones that really lay waste to a way of life, or in this case perhaps entire ruling and governments. We have countries all over the world that have unrest and that have power struggles, and some of them have it very frequently. In a lot of places in Africa, there's often this back and forth between who's actually the leader, and the people are the ones who suffer, right? As these people kind of take back power from one another. We don't see that as often in the Western world. We don't see military coups taking over countries as often in Europe or America. And yet that is the nature of this transit. And I spoke about it in my Rahu in Aquarius, Ketu in Leo report, where, the military, Mars with Ketu, extra militant, comes into this place of the leaders and the government, and there's an energy of wanting to overthrow it. Now, the military rarely makes its own choices, right? The military, by nature, in all countries, is trained to follow orders. So, right now, that's what we're seeing, this following orders. Follow orders, fly here, do this, and in some places, like in Texas, the governor's on board. In places like California, the governor's not on board, but that's another leader. The governor's another version of the president. It's another person who's holding that role of king, king of his state. And so the marching orders are being mostly followed at this point. But as they get closer, we're going to see that there are other people who are trying to usurp power that might give different marching orders, or that might put in the minds of those who are following orders that the person in charge doesn't have their best interests, or is, against the country, or in some way needs to be overthrown. One of the things I found really interesting in one of the articles I was reading in the paper, and I honestly can't remember if it was the Los Angeles Times or the New York Times, but it was an article on Israel's attack on Iran, and the fact that what they were doing was actually using these people in Iran who are very unhappy with the leadership there. They're already, and they're in the military, and they're already not happy. And it's been a long time. And that's what K2 tends to be, something that's been a long time coming. But it doesn't come until we have these eclipses or transits, particularly Mars, that make it explode, where it's like we can't not look at it anymore. So there's these people who are in these positions, perhaps of power within the military, because of course there's ranks, who are unhappy with the government, and Israel's taking advantage of that and using them. And some of them might be spies, or they might be somehow subverting Iran in their plan, and each country and each president or king or prime minister or whoever their name is, their title, obviously believes that what they're doing is right. The whole collective country doesn't necessarily believe that, though. And if somebody else can get in the ear of that entity that's marching and fighting for for the leader, that can turn real fast. That's how those coups happen, is that there's enough dissent that you can change the tides and have the very people that are supposed to be marching for the king march for an insurgent, march for somebody else, and overthrow. And so this is the kind of thing that we're going to see in this transit, and it will get more hot before it slows down. This is kind of just the, the headlines, the time, the exciting beginning of it when it's still sort of thrilling, but not so many people have actually lost their lives or their livelihoods or their homes, or the destruction is still less. When they get closer together, the destruction becomes more. So this here is July 20th. This is the day they're actually exact, Mars and Ketu. Um, but what we really want to look at is the growing of this transit. On this day, we see the moon is actually in her exalted place in Taurus, even in her exalted star. This is 3 o'clock in the morning Hawaii time, but that's 6 a.m. California time, Pacific time, and 9 a.m. in East Coast time. But she's joining Venus here. Venus is in her own sign. So there's almost a sweetness to this moment. Saturn is giving a one-way drishti. He gives a three-house gaze to this moon. So there can be some fear and the like that might be, especially because it's retrograde. It's like internalized fear, commitments that we've made that we're going back on, that kind of thing. Reflecting here on this actual day that the two come together. And oftentimes we will see like day of the conjunction, something huge happens, but we really see it in the days preceding. And you can see the moon is in Aries right before this, right? For the 2 days before, we have the moon in Aries, really into the evening, at least Hawaii time on the 17th. And then we have before that, the moon joined Saturn for a couple days. And then before that, the moon has joined Rahu. So Rahu's really amplifying that message of the people, that obsessive need to do something, to collect, to change, and puts a lot of illusion and um, suspicion. Rahu has a very suspicious nature to it. It's like, I see what's happening there and I'm getting this message and this is the thing that's coming, but it can also bring a lot of confusion. So we have Rahu on the moon. This is almost exact here at 3 a.m. on the 15th. So really even on the evening of the 14th, through the 14th, we have this Rahu moon conjunction and then immediately jumps in to join Saturn. We also still have Jupiter and the Sun joined at this time. And if we jump back, a couple weeks, we have them very close, like, right now. But here we have the 24th of June, which is, about a week from this day that I'm making this video. And Sun and Jupiter are exact. So when Jupiter is joined the Sun, it's combust. When any planet is joined the Sun, it's combust. And this means that the Sun's energy is overwhelming the planetary capacity to send us its energy. So Jupiter is magnanimous, it's hopeful, it's optimistic, it's idealistic. And the Sun is like burning off all of that extra energy and expansion that Jupiter offers and giving us a shorter fuse, and particularly in the land of our beliefs and our ideals. Now, Jupiter's already challenged here in Gemini because our beliefs and ideals come from facts. They come from information. They come from newspaper headlines. They come from all this stream of information. This is how we know what we know, and this is how we believe what we believe when Jupiter's in Gemini. Well, now he's combust. He would just be kind of confused or lost in a sea of information, but the Sun is here making there a fiery energy and a feeling that our beliefs are not being fully uh, realized or accepted or heard or understood. There's this frustration when something is joined to the Sun. It's like, and it's hot, right? And that always makes us feel more angry. So these two things are firing up over here already, and this is at the end of June. Well, these are inching closer and closer together, but they're still not quite there. They're still not quite so close together. So this is about a week from now. Today's the 18th of June. This is the 24th of June. And then, like I said, we move into, July 1st. They're still very close. Jupiter's still combust here. And then we move a little bit more and we have Mars and Ketu getting closer and closer. These are the early weeks of July. Now I'm going to start going by the days because one of the other things that happens is we start to get our retrograde planets. Who goes retrograde? here's Saturn retrograde on the 13th, and it probably happened on the 12th a few hours before. So we have Saturn retrograde on the 12th. Yeah, it looks like it's about 7 p.m. here in Hawaii. So for Pacific and, you know, Pacific time and a little bit after that, it will be on the 12th, but for the 13th for people who are in later time zones. So now we have a new issue, if you will, is that Saturn brings us our commitments to things, the things we're like, this is what I'm going to do. And it's also bringing us our sense of peace here in the oceanic realm of Pisces. It's a sense of emotional peace. It's frozen. So sometimes it's coming from fear more than actual true peace. But there's a desire to have things be calm and a desire to make commitment wherever Pisces is for us, whatever house that is for us. And this unwinding that happens with retrograde is that we often start to say, well, what did I commit to? Why did I make these choices? I'm not so sure anymore. It happens for almost half the year every year. So this is, we have huge periods of time where Saturn's retrograde, and we always have to rethink our commitments and we always have to rethink the things we've done. But in this case, it also internalizes our fear in the midst of a very fiery uh, situation. And that's going to increase the part where anything we're afraid of is going to be internalized, while what we are courageous about and fiery about is externalized. And at this point, when Saturn's retrograde, we have Mars at 20 degrees, we have Ketu at 25 degrees. They're 5 degrees apart from each other. So it's getting hot. And these two are still close, although not so close. And then we move into, that first round of Rahu joining the moon and those days that I showed marching up together. But then the next thing that happens right about as we move into this is Mercury goes retrograde. And this is the 17th. And so now we have Saturn and Mercury retrograde. And Mercury is our communication, the lines of communication. If you're trying to overthrow something or you're trying to, create some kind of thing, and all of a sudden your emails are all crossed, the wires are all crossed, your commitments, you're questioning. So this could actually create quite some conundrum and maybe some goof ups in the midst of whatever kind of action is trying to take place. So whatever strategic planned military action is supposed to be happening. And here we are with all the wires getting crossed and the communication being off, and it's in the emotional sign of Cancer where the sun is as well now. So the sun also changed signs, which is a destabilizing thing. The sun changed signs on the 16th. And so we have this, Saturn moving retrograde, sun, moon joining Rahu and Saturn, sun changing signs on the 16th, and Mercury going retrograde on the 17th. And so it's a lot, and I think it was the 17th. Yeah. So, well, at least here in Hawaii, it's the 17th. It's 9 p.m. Our time. So it's 11, or actually starts to be into 12 a.m. the 18th for people even in Pacific time. So the 18th, Mercury is retrograde. So this is, this is a time where there's going to be a lot of emotions flying and a lot of communication errors, a lot of anger about our beliefs not being understood or heard. So even within the collections of people who are trying to make movements and have these, like I said, sort of strategic plan, this militaristic idea of how things are supposed to go forward, whether it's the leaders, whether it's people trying to overthrow leaders, whether it's at your office, in your office space and there's some kind of, office coup going on, whether it's in your home, whether it's within yourself, there's going to be a lot of different elements running, and the moon is traveling right through the other end of this, right through the fear, right through the anxiety, right through the confusion into the fire of Aries. And finally, on the 20th, we did have her joining Venus in exalted place. So there's a lot of running elements we're working with, and they're all lending to us feeling a lot about what's happening and making action plans, that militaristic, exacting quality of Mars and Ketu. It's very good for surgery as well. It's like Ketu goes right in there, points where it is, and Mars is willing to do the blood and guts, is willing to make the cuts, is willing to deal with the stuff that is for a lot of people untoward. And so this quality of that heating up, and then at the same time, like, okay, our beliefs are getting really fired. Everything's like building, building, building in that week leading up. And then it's like, oh, but then the commitments are starting to go backwards. And oh, the moon's all anxious and like, yes, this is what we're doing. Oh, but now I'm fearful. And Mercury starts going retrograde and the lines are getting crossed. And it's a very emotional sign where we start to feel like somebody doesn't care about us. So you can see kind of like coups within coups. Like you can see that whatever group is gathering, there can be like insurgency within that as well. And this can really create a lot of chaos, because it won't follow in that organized manner that it might have seemed as we march through these next few weeks, where it really seems like things are starting to, giving their strong orders, and in the meantime, there's things happening in the background that we don't know that they're giving strong orders, and everybody thinks they're on the same page, and then boom, people are not on the same page. They're confused. They're backing out of their commitments. Their communication wires are getting crossed, and you know, but yet something's still happening somewhere, and the Mars and K2 will still have its explosive day. So this is really important to look at on a global level, but it's also really important to understand, you know, the fact that we tend to want to focus on the outside of us. Not always. Some people are more self-involved and only want to focus on themselves. But, if you're a caring, empathic person in this world, you often really care. You read these things like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And that, it's like you feel like you can't help, you don't know what to do. And example of, something people did is these huge protests that happen on the day of this military parade, this king, want to be king, making his parade on the same day as it's supposed to be honoring the army and the military. So this is an example of where there can be some like, okay, well, the military is not going to feel very good about that. It's supposed to be their day. And then he's making it a parade about himself. And then in the meantime, there's these huge protests of the people happening over here saying, no, we don't want a king, right? No kings, the K2 in Leo. And so this kind of thing is a way people can show up. And it feels good. It's like, okay, I'm doing something about it. But we can't forget that, first of all, these transits are happening in our own life, in our own world. So there's something we're not paying attention to in our own world at the same time. We can pore over the newspaper and marvel about what's happening over there and eat our dinner and have our nice conversation. But there's something we're not looking at in our own world as well. And in my members group, which is on Patreon, it's patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology, and the group Cosmically Aligned is the tier that I offer these live discussions for. And this week, tomorrow actually, we are going to be doing a live discussion on Mars K2 for all of the signs. So how is this showing up in your life? This is the outer world. This is going to be the news headlines. These are going to be the things that you feel a lot of energy around. But what can you do in your own world and life? There's this quality of negotiating peace in some way that has been permeating our outer and inner worlds. We've had Ketu and Uttara Falguni, which is a sign of agreements, and like I said, Saturn really trying to create some sort of frozen energy of peace in Pisces. And some of those things that we've been agreeing upon in our own world might be starting to get unraveled or might unravel completely. Some of the things we might be sitting on that we've known have been problems in our world might be ready to explode themselves. It might be a landmine, underneath your own home that you're not paying attention to while you're focusing on the headlines. So we're going to talk about this for each of the signs. We're going to use people's charts that are members of the group so that we can also see, people have planets there. In the sky, it's just Mars, K2, Rahu there, but people have planets in Aquarius, people have planets in Leo. Mars is casting drishti to Scorpio, so people have planets in Scorpio. Mars is also, in mutual drishti with Aquarius, but in an eighth house drishti with Pisces. He's actually casting drishti upon this Saturn right now as we speak. already saying, hey, what are the things we've committed to? Is that, what is this peace we have? Is it legit? We see, you know, in the greater context of all the different countries and places that things have been in unrest. I was reading through just country after country after country of where there's unrest. Many of the countries in Africa, India and Pakistan had unrest as recent as May. There's these tenuous sort of peace deals, a lot of which have been negotiated by the United States, which is in its own state of unrest. And so all of these tenuous lines that are happening all over the place are fault lines. They're places of insecurity that we're sitting upon and are very possible to, explode during this next month and a half. And so if you want to, look at it a little bit deeper on a personal level for you, see what planets are there, see what's getting, what's happening for you, what's getting hit and what's doing the hitting. What does Mars rule for you? If you're Scorpio or Aries, that's you. That's you walking in. You're the general of the army walking in and exploding something in that either fifth or 10th house for you. So these are the kind of things we're going to talk about. It should be a really interesting discussion. And if you would like to join, you can go to patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology, and sign up for Cosmically Aligned. There will be a recording if you can't join live. It's going to be at 10 a.m. Hawaii time tomorrow morning, the 19th. And also, if you just want to check out that Rahu in Aquarius, Ketu and Leo report I did, I talk about this Mars transit. When I get to the Ketu part of the transit for each of the signs, I talk about Mars because it's really important. It's setting off this transit. This axis is not the same without this transit. It is absolutely exploding it on the front end. Oftentimes we'll sit with the K2 for a while before we start to really see it through the eclipses. But Mars is marching right in and saying, no, no, we're doing this. We're doing this thing now. And so you can read that. If you're already on my email list, then you've already received the report. You can go back and look at it. If you want to join my email list, it's a free report that comes right to your inbox as soon as you sign up. That's at radhahomeastrology.com. Or if you're on the Patreon group, even the free members of my Patreon group receive that report. So you can just scroll through and find it there, and all the other reports have written. So hope you have a blessed day and week. I'll see you again soon to talk some more about all of the rest of our transits, but I wanted to leave you with this here today. Namaste.